Welcome back to How to Tickle Yourself. I'm your host, Duff McDonald, along with my co-host, Matt McButter. Today's guest, both Matt and I have known for, I'm guessing, going on almost 30 years at this point. Don't mean to age us, but point is we've known him a long time. He comes to us from Canada, but it might be more appropriate to say that he comes to us from inside of a lake. For the first part of his life, you would have described Jeremy Down as an artist, a musician, and creator. He fronted bands, traveled with the art collective DrawnOnward, and generally lived a good life. But a near-death experience in 2001, after a canoe capsized during a winter paddle, he got hypothermia and his brain pretty much shut off. That experience revealed the layers of consciousness and spiritual balance needed for happiness, and he spent the last few decades taking deep breaths and seeking deeper truths. Engaging in abstract painting as a means of self-healing, Jeremy has developed a sculptural style which has helped open the way to self-awareness. He splits his time between the interior of BC and Georgian Bay, Ontario, playing improvised music, creating a new series of geometric paintings, and teaching yoga and breathwork. In other words, he is the perfect guest for How to Tickle Yourself. Welcome to the show, Jared. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Right on.
At the present moment, traveling town to town, the mystery of the motion, right here, right now, right here, right now, whoa, right here, right now.
So I think we should start, because we teased it up here, with the good stuff. What's it like to almost die?
That's pretty straight and to the point. I like that one. I gotta say, if you could plan it, and you'd make it out of that situation, that everyone should do that. It is just the most fabulous gift. It really is a gift to be able to look at this from the other side and then make it back here. Be like, phew, all right, see what I learned.
That's probably why some people, do extreme sports, right? Like skydive and bungee jump. And, it's to almost push it a little bit over to have a little bit of glimpse of the great beyond and then pull it back.
Oh yeah. The edge has glinted for us for thousands of years. Like that's the pursuit of ecstasy, right? The pursuit of separating yourself from your body and your, the mortal coil. It's definitely why people, use drugs, use religion, extreme sports. There's all sorts of ways to kind of get there. I don't know if any of them, they kind of all lead up to the edge. Once you're at the actual edge, like they call it a veil, in the Buddhist tradition and a few other traditions, once you're at the veil, I don't know if you're, I don't think you're in charge anymore. I think the universe is in charge there. But it does feel like when you come back from that, there's information that you can use. There's kind of an experience that you can use. But I was looking for the autopilot button. Oh, look, I almost died. I kind of saw, I had a good glimpse of the way it is in the other side, and now I want the autopilot. Like I can make everything work out, and there's no instant button, unfortunately. So,
do you have memories? I mean, can we talk about the NDE as they are often called, or the near death experience? I mean, do you have memories of when you were, on the other side of the veil or whatever, on the other side of the edge?
Yeah, totally. The NDE, it's, some of them are memories and some of them were triggered by reading about NDEs because memories are held in our brain. They're held in the physical structure of our brain. I don't know that my memories of the near-death experience are in my brain. Sometimes I think they're like in my elbow or in my heel, but I don't, because they seem to be accessed a different way. But then they come to my mind as memories, and definitely like there's a certain arrangement of things. Like I was in the water swimming. I was aware that I was getting hypothermia, and you can kind of read about that. You kind of go down steps of awareness. It's like, oh, you kind of sink, and for a little while, you're like, oh, I'm watching a film about a guy swimming. And then for a moment, you're like, no, that's me. This is happening, dude. And then you go back and you're like watching a film again. You're very disconnected. You're disassociated from the experience. And then then the classic NDE chapters unfold. There's a tunnel of light. And I was swimming. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to swim down this really cool, glowing, beautiful tunnel of blue light. Isn't this rad? And then you come to a veil so you can kind of see through it. You kind of can't, you pass through it. And then I was aware of being, that's when our thinking and our structure our structure of thoughts and an arrangement of thoughts here breaks down. There's a lot of paradox. There's the we-I experience. So you pass through that veil and it's like, oh, wow, I'm experiencing this. Oh, but we're experiencing this. And on Earth, that would be a paradox. But in that situation, there's no paradox at all. It's completely obvious. It's like, oh yeah, well, this is the way it is. Mm-hmm. There's also a very strong sense that you're returning to home, and that life on Earth in a body is kind of like the holiday that you went on for 2 weeks, and now you're back home, where the real thing is. And that's kind of almost comedic. There's a little bit of laughter, like, oh, really? I thought that, like being Jeremy down, in Canada for the last 30 years was the main thing. No, this is the main thing. This is where I've lived for thousands, millions of eons. And then you return back and you like live in a body again. You come back, you're like, oh yeah, that one wasn't very good. It didn't do so well, and then we're going back again. And there's kind of like almost laughter. There's a bit of humor to this. Because there's not a lot of judgment of like, oh, you really screwed that one up, you idiot, you got to do it again. There's not judgment, but there's a sense that you keep going back, that like living a human life is a vehicle for some type of spiritual development. And so when you get back to that collective soul zone, you're maybe one more life through. So that's pretty strong. Another chapter in the NDE is the download, the understanding down, and it literally feels like you just stuck your finger into a terabyte drive and you've just downloaded everything. Quantum physics, the birds and the bees. I don't know, Taekwondo. There's this kind of complete understanding of how everything interrelates. When I came back into my body and started living my life, that was quite fragmented. I couldn't piece it all together and go snap up a PhD or something. It didn't work like that.
Fly a helicopter immediately. Get into your helicopter.
A couple overlaps here. Number one, my book is called Tickled. So when I had my own thing, it was not an NDE, but it was clearly an awakening of sorts. It all seemed kind of absurd to me. So I had that moment like you where I was like, oh my God, the burdens that I have been carrying, whatever they were, now have almost evaporated. And this whole thing I have a greater appreciation of what's going on. And when you mentioned quantum physics, there's a chapter in Tickled where I talk about quantum physics a little bit. And I referred to Joey as, and I don't think I talk about this in the book. You're talking about the download. I told her it was called the drawer of truth.
Oh, there you go.
Suddenly a drawer opened and I could see inside it. And I was like, oh, I understand this thing that I hadn't even really been mulling over before. Like it wasn't an active intellectual thing. But it was, stuff that was in my field of awareness. And I was like, okay. And it suddenly was clear as day. As day.
It's an aha moment. It really is. It's kind of eureka. You're like, oh, that's how it all fits together. And, that's how it works. And it's very, there's comedy there. You're just like, oh my gosh, really? Like, it's hidden. All that understanding and all that truth is kind of hidden behind all the, all the structures of thought that we've created.
The ego.
Hidden behind the ego.
It's the ego, right?
Yeah,
it's
totally.
It's this lens that we're seeing it through. I mean, I've definitely, I think through this podcast, come to really believe that is what, is what kind of gets in the way of that kind of clarity. And not that I haven't even really had one of these moments. The closest maybe I've had would be, tripping.
Yeah,
which
sure.
I do think tripping out can actually kind of bring you there as the NDE. And then it seems to have a lot of commonalities with people that have just had like a kind of moment of clarity or a spiritual awakening, similar that, to what Duff had. We've had a couple of guests on here, Tara Bach and his friend Malcolm Fitch, who had these moments as well. And they all have, I think the interesting thing is they all have these really common elements.
Very parallel.
And, they're all sort of, reached maybe through different means, like whether it's, pharmacological or it's just kind of a natural or it's, having a near-death experience.
So let's go. So you get back, you're okay. You're still alive. And you, it's new. Something's new. How would you characterize your, once you're out of the danger and stuff, right? Where you're sort of putting together what just happened. How would you characterize your new perspective? What, like, if you can summarize it at all?
Well, it didn't kind of come together quickly. I was quite physiologically affected. People that know me and knew me at the time said I seemed very fragmented. I've used that word before, but maybe even, spaced out for a while. And then when things started to come together, it coalesced in terms of like a worldview. So I grew up in pretty heavy fundamentalist Christianity. So part of it was very damaging, but the basis of any religion, like the real root where all the religions kind of shared this position, there's a whole bunch of truth in there. And I had grown up on all that. So it started kind of bubbling to the surface, and this sense of like, there's meaning to the universe. There's some kind of consciousness that we're all part of. So that started to coalesce. And of course, I was, at the time, my main focus was writing music and making paintings. And I had only been living in BC for 1 year, and I went there and was painting full time. And I was really pushing my work. In terms of its formal arrangement, I was trying to move away from some of the problems that abstract painting has and is part of the history of art. We don't need to go into that, but I was really pushing the work. And I was actually physically pushing that style that day. That's what I was doing in the canoe. I had my painting with me. I was searching for a place on the shore to go and paint. So what happened within about a week or two is I was in the studio looking at one of my square paintings. Here's two behind me. And I hallucinated. The painting moved, changed, and kind of like reformed as a shape. And part of what I was dealing with was the corners. The corners of the paintings are a problem because that's just the context for what's happening in the painting. And at the time that really bothered me. I was like, no, this isn't it's not a picture of something. It's an event. Like me painting this painting, I'm unpeeling the layers of myself. And so I watched this painting reform on the wall, and I literally went over, broke it apart into a shape, and restretched it as the first painting, number one in the series of shape canvases that I've been doing since then, and kind of possibly tailed off in the last couple of years. So that just absorbed me. Because no one had ever done it. Like, there's no precedent in art history. There's a couple of people who've done similar things, but not really. And so I just completely dove into that. Part of that whole restructuring of art was the destruction of my domestic life, my marriage, my relationship to regular society. I kind of became a total freak for a little while. And enjoyed myself. It was just great.
So Matt mentioned Tara Bach, who has been on here twice. She's a wonderful painter, and I've always described her stuff as she does mostly 2D paintings, but I've always said she manages to capture movement in a way that's just stunning to me. Like, I can look at it, and even though it's 2D, I can see 3D, right? So you were seeing that in your own work and saying, why have I restricted myself to 2D?
Pretty much, but I didn't know that. I didn't know what I was seeing. I knew that something was there, and I was seeking it. But it was, you're in a fog. You're like, I know something's here. I don't know how to find it. I don't know what it is because it didn't exist. It wasn't something I could find in art history and find the master of that style or technique, which is what you do in art school. You find the people that inspire you and you copy their work, and eventually you grasp their work. You do it in music too, right? You take a mentor. So this was kind of searching for something in the dark, and that near-death experience literally kind of, shot me out of a cannon, viewing the world in a completely different way. And then I made this work and was like, what has gone on here? And so that became my own therapy. I started, like, my childhood and my upbringing, all the neurosis, everyone has their own version. It started to peel away. And so making these paintings really helped that. It hurt, it helped. It hurt, it helped. You know what I mean? And over the years, I kind of healed myself partially from being, what, a horrible guy? No, just from suffering, from everything that I was. And it was such a gift. The near-death experience was such a gift. And, I'm not going to go and tell you to go tripping. That's up to you. But whatever way you find for yourself to reach the ecstatic, to reach the soul, it can be religion. Didn't work for me, but hundreds of years ago, that was the way most of the world experienced the spirit or the soul, was through the structure of religion, and there's all sorts of other traditions. So it's something that's in us already. It's already there. It's like, how do you find it?
Right. It's like, I talk about the word discover in Tickle. It's like, you're not finding something, you're uncovering something. You're taking the cover off the thing. So you have moved into yoga, meditation, and breath work in a significant way. Those are methods of centering and sort of aiming at the core. You want to tell us about how those have sort of emerged in your life?
Yeah, they started, well, I guess the groundwork was laid when I was in university. I was on the rowing team, and I got hurt. I pulled a disc in my back. And so there's a physiotherapist for the team, and he did some work on me. He's like, so, you're 6'5", you're kind of skinny. You're going to have to stretch for the rest of your life. So just count on that. So I had already kind of had a bit of a stretching practice. I knew my body, wasn't going to be super resilient. And then as I became more of a seeker, I studied a couple different styles of meditation, and then got into yoga. And then I needed those things after the near-death experience, because I really did come apart at the seams. I'm saying, oh, it's all great, it's such a gift. But there was a few years there where I was really coming apart. And I was unsure. Like what was going on. And I needed someone else's discipline. I needed to learn a discipline that would kind of guide me. So yoga was really good, and it connected to what I need physically as well. And of course, the part in yoga means yoke. You're connecting, you're yoking our daily consciousness, our consciousness right now, to that collective consciousness that we all share and has always been. And the way it's yoked is through the poses. The poses are designed in a certain flow to get you out of your head. It gets you out of your head. It gets you into the moment. You use your breath to do that. And I found over the years that the practices of yoga, I did a whole bunch of styles, the practices of yoga that brought me peace were the ones that were really focused on the breath, where part of the way through the practice, I'm not trying to get the pose perfect, and I'm, not listening to the music or something. I was like completely focused on my breath, out of my mind, letting the crushing emotions and thoughts go. So that was something I focused on in myself, and then pushed it more in terms of breath work and meditation. And then I was asked to teach out west in my community. No one was teaching yoga there, and there's quite a few people who did it. And they're like, will you teach a class? I'm like, no, I don't want to be a yoga teacher. And finally I caved, and I've been teaching out there for 7 years. And what I'm finding is it's rewarding, people coming back to me at the end of the class saying, thank you. I can think clearly. Like, what else could I want, other than to help people? So that's the main point right now.
So I had, I mentioned in Tickle, there was a moment. So again, I didn't have a near death. I had more of a, I was thinking about how I knew what I knew and going deep in mentally. And I turned to Joey one day, my wife, and I was like, oh my God, everything I thought I knew was wrong.
Yeah.
And it was startling. It wasn't as scary as it maybe could have been, given the nature, like that, the meaning of that sentence.
Yeah.
But I basically was like, oh, I've been thinking about this all wrong, if not just thinking all wrong. So have you had like a reordering of how you approach your life? Like what what's in your mind when you're out of bed in the morning? Do you find that if you met 25-year-old you, would you even recognize him?
Yeah, I would recognize 25-year-old me. Well, it's interesting because a month ago, the band I played in when I was 25, Lorded, we played a show, and it was just amazing. Partially because the muscle memory of playing hundreds of shows, it never goes away. So we rocked. It was great. and while I'm singing those lyrics, I'm like, oh geez, dude, like you went through this. you wrote these lyrics and you were working it out. They weren't, my songs were not like, hey, I met this girl, she's really rad, she loves me too. It just wasn't that way. It was like, there's some angst in there. I was really tearing at the soul. And I was meeting my 25-year-old self on stage that night, and I just wanted to give him a hug and be like, you'll be all right eventually. Just hold on, dude. That was nasty.
I'm pretty sure I still have a signed copy of Breakfast of Champignon somewhere.
Oh, yes. That's great. Well, that's worth at least $6 or $7, Matt. You should hold on to that.
No, I said signed. $10 for sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. There you go.
I would never sell it. That's the thing. It's too precious.
Oh, I'm glad you still got it.
So your kid, you didn't have kids when this happened, did you?
Yes, Ginger was 1. So
she was 1. Okay.
She was born April 2nd, 2000, and I fell in the lake on February 15th, 2001. So I was very aware. Swimming to shore, I became aware that I was not going to make it. And I started to say goodbye. I actually said goodbye to my parents. I said goodbye to Ginger, said goodbye to her mom. Kind of almost said sorry for the mess I'm about to leave, because I couldn't see shore, and I knew that it, like, my heart rate was super slowing. And an interesting thing was, I was a swimmer on the swim team in high school, and I was a breaststroker. And it's all about, deep breaths, controlling your breath, focus, breathing. And on my way to shore, I became very aware that any distraction in my mind was using up my heat. So I was completely focused on breathing while doing breaststroke on my way to shore. And I'm like, oh, that's, all that is it's the same as breath work. You're focused when you're breathing. Mm-hmm. That's kind of an aside. But I did have a family, and said goodbye.
And is that how you made it? You swam to shore? Like, you didn't get fished out by anyone. You actually did sort of mentally focus, and you breaststroked your way back to shore? Is that what happened?
Well, no, not really. Because on the way, I was aware. I was like, oh, I'm not going to make it. And 2 bald eagles were flying above me, like circling above my head while I'm swimming. And I had started to call out on my out breath. I was like, oh, I should probably call out. Maybe someone's around. So the 2 eagles were above me. And at that point, I wasn't so identified with being a human separate from animals. It was far more of a, like, my cousins are flying above me. And in the water, there's fish swimming around. Those are my cousins too. So I asked the eagles for help. And I said to the fish, I was like, if I get out of this, I promise I will not catch you and eat you anymore. Because I used to fish. So, which was a deal that I forgot, strangely, for about 7 years. And one day on Father's Day, 7 years later, a bunch of dads and I are in a boat, fishing the river mouth. And I'm casting, and I'm kind of like, oh, I just remembered. I think I'm going to kill a fish, And the guys in the boat are like, Jared, what the hell, man? No one
We're fishing.
Anything. This sucks. Anyway, so I was helped. If you want to call that the universe or whatever word you want to call it, I personally think that the consciousness that we're talking about, that is underlying in all of us, I think it's somehow in some manner shared with animals too, because the eagles flew to the nearest house, which wasn't that close, and did full screeching circuits over the front deck until the people who I happen to know came out on the deck, and they're like, what is going on? Why are there bald eagles freaking out on our front deck? And then they heard me yelling, and they live at the water's edge, and they came down. So something like the NDE that I described, I'm pretty sure I wasn't physically swimming when that happened. I don't know, but I left my body, and then I came back in my body, made it to shore, And then it felt like I was waiting for hours. It was a while. That was horrible, being on shore. But eventually Barb and Dick, the folks who heard me, they called search and rescue, and they came down to the shore, and I knew the guys in search and rescue, and they pulled me out, took me to hospital. My doctor was there. He's like, "You're an idiot. Eat this cheese sandwich and go home." Because he's like, "Your vitals are all fine. I don't know how many brain cells are gone, but you know, I have a lot of memory loss from all parts of my life. So maybe that was the extent. If there was any actual brain damage, I have a really bad memory, but other than that, that's kind of the structure of the story anyway.
Are you a different person? Are you nicer? Are you more loving? Are you more patient? Any of the things that come from a sense of eternity?
I wish I could say that. You know, like before, I was looking for the autopilot button. Like, oh yeah, check. Now I'm just a fabulous guy. I wasn't. You know, I wasn't present all the time. I wasn't a better person, and really until I took up a daily practice of meditation, like every day, shut up, sit down, do the work, and quiet your mind. Get out of thinking you are your thoughts, and get out of being controlled by your emotions. And so, you know, this whole thing, I knew about all this fabulous stuff we're talking about, and I could access it at points. There was like these bright points, and then I would just suffer. And so it was it was not better. Until I realized that maybe I didn't have one of those flashing experiences that turns a regular guy into the Buddha or a guru or something. I had to work really hard, and I still really do. When I started doing the work, and I use the word shut up and sit down and breathe, because it's really hard to discipline yourself. You know, I'd rather, I don't know, make a sandwich. And I have to do it every day. I have to get out of myself every day. And when I do, I realize, oh, I've been working on this for a long time. And I don't have to react to this situation, you know, the way I used to. I can actually step back, take a breath, be conscious of what I'm saying. And that has started to make me a happier person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so consumed with my own suffering. That's pretty recent. And that was literally like, I'm super depressed. This sucks. Everything sucks. What am I going to do? Geez, drinking 8 beer doesn't help. You know, telling my near-death experience doesn't help. Making abstract paintings, it doesn't help anymore. It's hard work now, but I'm okay with that.
What about the art itself? Like, one thing for me in writing Tickle now, like I was in the middle of a thing, the words came out in a different way. Now, granted, it was nonfiction for me normally, and I was sort of moved to memoir, so it was, you know, clearly more coming from within than a lot of my other work had. Does your art come differently than it used to?
Well, I remember you saying, you know, the book you started before Tickle and the previous books you made were hard work. And then when you wrote Tickle, it was like really flowed.
Yeah.
Quite quickly. So that flow state, I mean, that flow state is something you can always access, whether you've had experiences like what we're talking about or not. That's, you know, the music that I've played over the years, the most engaging music is improvised music. You're totally present. It's changing. You don't know what the other players, you kind of maybe know, but you don't. So you're so present and you're in that flow state. Are you the chicken or are you the egg? You know, where are you? Well, you're right on top of the moment. So that's where all the magic happens. It's the same in painting. So in the painting process, you structure the process so that you can get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
That place requires you to not be completely in control all the time. There's got to be surprises. So my work has always had hidden elements, things that I'm unsure as to what it's going to look like, and then I have to adapt to it in the moment. And abstract painting from the onset has always, like Kandinsky, that's kind of what he did. He was doing something, he was channeling something, and he was unsure of it. So I don't know if that got any better from the near-death experience. It's more that channeling. Now I know where it's kind of from, where it's coming from, but still I get consumed with mind, consumed with emotion, and then the painting just, is that. Oh, great. There's another
one. All right. Well, Matt, you got any more questions? Jer is obviously as big a fan of meditation as I am. We're trying to browbeat Matt into a meditation practice. He's still resisting.
I know. I don't know why I'm digging my heel. It's not that I'm digging my heels in. It's like when I have tried, I just haven't been able to, I guess, succumb to it. Like the whole time I'm just sitting there thinking like, I got some stuff I need to write down. Like I need to get to my notebook, or I need to get to my computer. I have these things on my to-do list I need to be doing. And it's same with yoga as well. But, as Duff and I have talked about many times on this podcast, I do get there when I'm, running, cycling, even playing hockey. I kind of get into this like flow state, or try to get into a flow state. And I just enjoy doing it, well on the ice. Or well on my bike. And then I feel, I don't know, rather than I just can't kind of sit there in a dark room or on my floor or on a mat. And I've never got there before. So maybe one day.
Oh, no. I don't know I don't even know if you need to say, oh, one day I'll get there. No, you're already like, not everyone has to meditate. Like I was a tortured soul. I needed something. I really needed something to help. Maybe you're just, you don't need something so regimented. And if you know kind of that state through riding or playing hockey, like there is a connection there where we're absorbed in our thoughts, right? That's our state. And there's reasons for that. But when you're absorbed in your thoughts and your emotions to the point of suffering, like where you're really suffering, that's no good. Like that sucks. It's terrible. I would do anything I could to help people in that state. Yeah. So if you are not in that state, I don't know, dude, go play some hockey. Like you're good. Duff, lay off, man. I don't know. And as I said, I'm not.
All right. Fine. I'll take it easy on him.
But
he won't though. He won't. He'll keep on me.
No, he won't. That's part of the deal. But it is an underlying thing. It's with you all the time. Like Eckhart Tolle, he doesn't tell you to go and do anything. He's telling you it's already there. Like you're present. You're present right now. You're present right now. Oh, you're present again. You're still present. That's it. He's not teaching you, a practice or a tradition or this. He has his own version of saying, well, we're already here. So that works for some people and it doesn't work for other people. And what I'm realizing through the years is I don't even know if I have the tools to help everyone get to that state. And I'm not the guy that can tell you that hitting that state riding your bike isn't enough. Like it's not up to me.
No, that's Duff's job.
Yeah.
No, you know what though? You make a good point though. One of the things that I stress both in Tickled and also in life. Now, it's not about telling someone so much what to do. I have suggestions on things not to do. Ways to not distract yourself, ways to not think yourself out of the present moment, ways to try to stay out of your ego. And I find that to me, the most interesting stuff of things is things we shouldn't do, because we can't tell someone what they should do. They'll do what's in their nature. But I think we can give good advice on things to try to do less of. And you can get closer to a a peaceful state by not doing some things. And one of the main things that, you referenced the book I was going to write, it was called The Precision Paradox, is to stop counting everything, right? We got to stop counting our lives, because we get obsessed by thinking that we're headed somewhere, right? I have 4 now, maybe I'll have 5 later. Bang, you're not present anymore. You're thinking of where you might be. Or I've done this many miles, I will do this many later, and you're sort of treating the miracle that is your existence as if you can improve on it. And I think counting kind of does that to us. But you're right. There's we all got to find our own path.
Yeah, that's a good one. The counting thing is interesting. I think there's a whole list of things that take us out of the moment, and they change culturally too. They change in different cultures for different types of people. I don't know. There's so many ways at this, because, well, I have this kind of picture in my head, is this consciousness we're talking about is an orb. For whatever reason, it's in the shape of an orb. So that means you can come at it from every direction.
Right. So I see a sphere, or I see a torus, right? Like a internally generating fountain of some sort, but same point. No circumference.
Or to go back to Borges quickly, it's an orb. The universe is a sphere with its center nowhere and its circumference everywhere.
Oh, right? Borges is so good.
Did we talk about that, Matt, in season 1, the story, The Aleph?
Yes.
Where the guy invites him over to go down, and he's like, I got to show you something in my basement. And it's basically the entire universe. That's one of the greatest stories of all time.
Yeah, I know. I remember, I used Borges as a trigger to come back to myself in some years. And I didn't really know. I just started reading them. I was like, these are words of truth. They're like tuning me in. Anytime you hear words of truth or you read words of truth, that brings you back to the moment. And that's how you can tell if someone's just trying to get paid, because it resonates, right? If it's real. And so you can use all these things to bring you back. Like DrawnOnward, all these different traditions. They're great. There's so many of them.
You make a really interesting point. I have found since the Tickled experience that the reading of certain people resonates very loudly, and my patience for other types of writing has gone down. And I think it's like you said, there's a reminder, you have a fragmented experience that you had, but there's some things that ring true, and you're like, oh no, this guy knows. And Borges is one, and for me, the other is Dylan. It's like Dylan's always known. He's been trying to tell us the whole time.
Yeah, that's true. And it's amazing that a guy like Dylan has so many fans. His music spread through the whole world. And it's still connecting with people in countries all around the world. And all you have to do is hear a little bit, and it connects. And you're like, oh, I have an understanding. Like we can't plan these bloomings or blossomings of consciousness. They just happen. They're an expression of the universe. So if Dylan's one of the conduits, man, so be it. It's great.
Right on. Yep. All right, JR, we're running a little long here. Look, it's been great to have you. I want to send listeners to your online presence. We have jeremydown.com, right? Is that still the current website to find your art? And I'm looking here at Crossing Over, The Art of Jeremy Down video on YouTube. We want to send people to take a look at that.
Yes, that's the story of basically the story I told, but a slightly different version of it.
All right, so people check that out. Crossing Over, The Art of Jeremy Down, or jeremydown.com. Look, it's been great to have you. It's been great to reconnect. We hadn't talked really in a while. Yeah.
Thank you. This is a good time. Thanks. It's awesome.
All right. Cheers, man.
Thanks, Jer.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Doc.
So we could have kept going there forever. He's as you said at the very beginning, it's really wild. The similarities, we find similarities in experience all through life, right? With people we share hobbies with and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
not a new thing, but just the, there was nothing similar about what happened to him in terms of nearly getting hypothermia or getting hypothermia and nearly dying. But whatever it was that shifted, and like the words ring true to me. It's pretty
Mm-hmm.
fascinating.
Yeah, I think maybe something to do with that ego dissolution part of it, right? Like that part starts to kind of dissolve. And so you end up having a different, I don't know, level of understanding about what this all is.
Yeah. So
right?
what my yogis would tell you is that there is universal consciousness, and you are a sort of a unique expression of it. That by virtue of basically the phenomenal power of consciousness itself, because it creates everything, confuses itself into thinking that it's a subject, not an object. And that's where your ego sort of arises. And it's like, there's me and there's other things. And it's like, no, what happens is you realize that it's all one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so this part of you that is absolutely sure that you are separate from everything around you gets weakened. And suddenly you can see that the interconnectedness, but also, like you say, it's like for me at least, it was like a shaking off. It's like, oh my God, I thought I had all these things sorted out, but it was all just one point of view.
Yeah.
Mine, the result of my own life experiences, which cannot help but be one point of view.
Yeah.
And we all strive for objectivity and stuff, but even that, everything is subjective through your filter. Everything.
Yeah. And, by that same token, I've got one for you that arose while talking to Jer.
Excellent.
Okay. It's out of my mind, or, being out of one's mind. Like usually when people refer to someone being, it's like, oh, that guy was out of his mind, right? You're like on the street in the Lower East Side and there's some guy yelling some crazy stuff or throwing some stuff around. You're like, oh, that guy was definitely out of his mind. And it's kind of got the negative connotation, like the person is actually crazy. But Jer used it in a completely different way of like getting out of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He was like, oh, sometimes you need to get out of your mind, or I need to get out of my mind, and, practice yoga, meditation can take him there, out of his mind, in a positive connotation. Right.
Okay.
And it's interesting because sometimes when people have a, call it a moment of clarity, spiritual awakening, some people might look at that and say, oh, there's two different perspectives on it. Like people who don't necessarily share that might be like, oh, that guy kind of flaked out. He went out of his mind. Whereas from the other perspective, there might be like, no. He got out of his mind as he should have.
No,
he
entirely.
shouldn't have been. Yeah. You see what
entirely.
I mean? It's interesting. And those are both a matter of perspective on
whether you're still in your mind or whether you're out of your mind. Right.
Yeah.
And if you're still in it, someone who seems out of it, it doesn't seem like a place you want to be. Okay, so here's a related one. Debashish Banerjee, who I interviewed, in his, I'm taking a class with him now on Aurobindo, and he was talking about Humpty Dumpty.
I'm familiar with the guy.
Right.
Yeah.
So what does the mind do? Right. The mind, the way it kind of functions is by drawing lines and sort of trying to put get a discrete grasp of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It segments, it organizes, it sorts, right? So as soon as the mind gets involved, it starts fragmenting reality. And Debashish's point about the Humpty Dumpty story is that once the mind is engaged in its fragmentation thing, Humpty Dumpty's broken into pieces, it actually can't put it back together. you can't, the mind is not capable, simply by virtue of what it does, of putting reality back together into an indivisible whole of seamless relations, because it's started by fragmenting. And the point that the yogis make is only intuition can do that, which is basically a look inside, deeper than the mind, where you get a sense of your wholeness, right? So a lot of these experiences give you a view, or from what I can tell, give people a view of wholeness that eludes the mind, because it's not what the mind does.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably something to be said here around left brain, or what has traditionally been called left brain, right? Where that left brain, when you say the mind, it's those left brain cognitive functions that are the analytical, breaking it down. Whereas traditionally, what is that? What is in neuroscience been kind of referred to as right brain cognitions does have more of that ability to look at the whole. Right. So maybe there's some hemispherical.
No, there's a complete parallel there between the two. And the point, I guess, though, is that however you get there, wholeness is the goal. Jeremy mentioned a paradox or two at the beginning, and I talk about it in the book, where it's like paradoxes don't exist. They only appear to exist because you cannot see we're not looking at something properly. So we say this doesn't make sense when, married with that. It's like, well, reality does make sense. And we know that because it's happening. So whenever we perceive a paradox, it's a failure of understanding. It's not that there's an actual contradiction that can't be resolved.
So what you're saying is that paradoxes exist, yet they don't exist at the same time.
Exactly. Right.
Which
for
is
the mind and outside the mind. That's a paradox.
Which is
there you go. All right. So, one of the things I was trying to get at when I was talking to him there, and he did express it when he was talking about changing from 2D painting into sculpture. He was talking about a freedom that he hadn't seen or grasped before, and that he suddenly could feel and intuit in his art, and it started to express itself in his art. So here's a Aurobindo quote to close us out. And the only thing I need to do is define two terms before. Purusha is the soul, according to the yogis, and Prakriti is nature. And it's essentially the difference between your egoic self, which is, a product of your nature, and the sort of the divinity within you. So he's talking about freedom here. And he says, for the man who has this knowledge and lives and acts in it, there can be no binding works, no personal and egotistically appropriated action, egoistically. There is only the divine Purusha acting by the divine Prakriti in his cosmic energy, while the knowledge and the possession of his divine existence and consciousness by the soul unified with him is the goal of all this God-directed movement and activity. Here's the punchline. To know that and to live and act in this unifying consciousness is to be free. Right? So what we're all searching for is freedom. And you can get freedom by a sense of wholeness, because you get a feeling for what this is all about, and you sort of shake off the binds and bounds of the mind and the intellect that, for whatever reason, have been holding you back.
So that's what the trucker convoy was all about.
Exactly.
Freedom.
They were looking for the freedom to do what seems appropriate in the moment. Thanks you, Jeremy, for joining us. That was a great interview, and we'll be back with you in a week.
Bye-bye.
At the present moment, traveling town to town, the mystery of the motion, right here, right now. Right here, right now. Whoa, right here, right now.
You've been listening to How to Tickle Yourself with your hosts Duff McDonald and Matt McButter. You can help us by liking, subscribing, and sharing this podcast with others. You can talk to us and see what else is happening on Instagram and Facebook at How to Tickle Yourself. This program was recorded in Studio B of the historic Rockledge Recording Studio and the Tunnel Under Arundel. Right Here, Right Now, our original 16-part theme music was written and recorded by the legendary Paul Reddick and Kyle Ferguson of the Sidemen, with the brilliant Steve Mariner on bass and drums and in the mixing room. The podcast is produced and distributed by Storic Media. Our editor is Andrew Steiner. Our coordinator is Samantha Abramovitz. Our producers are Kristen Verbitsky and Chuck LaBella. For more information, visit storicmedia.com. That's STORIC media.com.
My love, my dear, oh, everything's